Today, I want to talk about an aspect of Bernhardt Design that doesn't get a lot of public attention, but which I think really makes us unique in our industry. And that's how the marriage of our 130-year history of craftsmanship and quality with our commitment to contemporary design allows us to produce high-quality products that are uniquely ours. So I want to start with a video about our Corbeau chair, which was designed by French designer Noe du Chauffour-Lawrence. And I think it really embodies that philosophy. Noe employed both hand sketching and CAD modeling to design the chair, but we had to rely on tried and true woodworking techniques to actually realize it in production. It's 5 minutes long, and I'm going to stop partway through so that you don't get too fatigued and so that I can provide a little bit of commentary, and then we'll watch the rest of it. Okay, so what you probably noticed most during that was some of the equipment that we were using. That is still equipment. That's not just a pretty set or anything. That is still equipment in our factories that we've been using for decades. And other than some technologies like CNC technologies, these are still some of the same methods employed for commercial production of fine woodworking. And so I hope you also got the sense that even though this is a sort of a stylized staged video, that there's really an art to woodworking, that even in a commercial, in an industrial sort of process like ours, where we might be making it by the dozens or hundreds rather than one or two, there's still so much skill and expertise and talent required by the woodworkers to execute a design. And now we'll keep on going. So another thing that you probably noticed throughout that whole video was all of the different nuances of the wood. And wood is a unique material in that it is a completely organic material. Every tree is different, the conditions in which it grew are different, and it results in different wood, from a strength standpoint to an ability to manipulate, to even the graining and the figuring in the wood. So we really try to, through the whole process, to accentuate the beauty of that process in our wood products through how we join pieces together and marry them up on a product, to how we develop our finishes to really let the wood be the focal point. And lastly, that you might have noted, let's see, dang it. Okay, there we go. Lastly, what you might have noticed was that there are a lot of old spaces in that video. A lot of exposed brick, a lot of rough hewn floors. Even at the beginning, when you see those trolley carts coming down the railroad tracks in our original wood shed, this place is really old. And that's what I want to touch on first when it comes to our philosophy and what influenced that philosophy. And that is Bernhardt's history, dating back to the late 19th century. Bernhardt Furniture was founded in 1889 in the North Carolina foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And it was founded by a man named John Matthias Bernhardt, who is our current CEO's great-grandfather.
Coleman, sorry to interrupt. What about North Carolina foothills made it the ideal place for Bernhardt to place roots?
Well, thank you for asking. It's actually kind of interesting, a bit of economic history. What was interesting about the foothills and forests of Western North Carolina and Southwestern Virginia, which in the turn of the 20th century, a little bit before, a little bit after, really became a nexus of American furniture production, was for a number of different reasons. The first one was that there was abundant wood and clean water. So you had, forests upon forests that had never really been touched before were available for raw materials. The workforce was relatively inexpensive compared to up in the Northeast. The Northeast had started industrializing right around the middle of the 19th century. The South, because of the Civil War and all the Reconstruction era afterwards, was relatively far behind, both in terms of industrialization and in terms of wages and costs. The third thing that made this rural area of North Carolina very attractive was that in sort of post-Civil War South, the railroads had sort of started becoming regional and national railroads. And so there was a network of railroad track laid throughout this region, connecting places like Charleston and Atlanta with Washington and Richmond and New York and beyond, and to new industrial centers in the Midwest. So for the first time, this area really had become a sort of center point of the American economy. So that's what made it all attractive. It suddenly had easy access to urban centers. It had easy access to raw materials, and it had an inexpensive workforce. And then the fourth thing I would add is that this area was heavily settled by German immigrants from the Black Forest region of Germany, which brought a really deep and ancient woodworking tradition with them. Think about cuckoo clocks and finely carved wood chairs and Black Forest antler mounts, deer mounts. They really have an incredible woodworking tradition that was brought to this region that didn't exist in the more sort of anglicized eastern parts of the state and country. So I hope that answers the question. And Bernhardt's a very German name, so that... It
certainly makes sense, yes.
Okay, so this is an image of an early workshop, and I love this shot. This is where some of the first Bernhardt furniture was produced. You can even see it doubled as a stable. An interesting thing about Bernhardt was that it was the first industrial operation to develop in this region, in the sort of this foothills region for us, and is one of the oldest family-held furniture companies still left in the United States. The Bernhardts were originally loggers, and as you can see here, this is an early log flume that moved wood from the forested mountains down to manufacturing in the valley where we're located today. And as you can see, their regulations were much lighter on who could work and at what age. So that was helpful too, I guess. Quickly, the region and Bernhardt developed, and their skills in wood craftsmanship evolved into commercially being able to carve wood, do turnings, and construct wood products on a larger, more commercial scale, as well as in finishing and upholstery. And as I mentioned, the clean mountain water and the mineral content here makes for particularly clear and brilliant finishes that in the more polluted areas of the Northeast at the time wouldn't have been possible. Dirty water results in muddy finishes. The expertise and ingenuity paired with designs that we had that became popular in places like Cincinnati and Cleveland and Chicago and New York helped Bernhardt grow over the years. This is a picture of an early 20th century factory, and actually portions of this factory make up our upholstery plant 7 today. So some of those first images that you saw of the lumber shed and of the carts to bring lumber into the factory were part of this building as well, close to 100 years ago. And one of the really exciting things about the company is the continuity it's had from being still family owned, with the 4th generation currently at the helm. And so you can see in the upper left, that's John Matthias Bernhardt, the founder of the company. And the bottom left, you have a picture of his son, John Christian Bernhardt, and grandson, Alex Bernhardt Sr. And then in the larger picture of the family, you have Ann and Alex Bernhardt, who are sort of the matriarch and patriarch of the company. There are sort of co-chairmen of the board. And then cousins, William Collett and Roundtree Collett, and Alex Bernhardt Jr., who are collectively the 4th generation that are involved with the company. Lost my place. Oh, an interesting story is that after Ann and Alex's children had all sort of grown up, gone away to college and to do whatever, most empty nesters would look for a fun little hobby, like maybe needle pointing or fly fishing or something like that. Ann decided to start a new division for the company, or Ann and Alex collectively decided to start a new division. And so in the early 1980s, they started Bernhardt Design as an avenue to sell chairs and lounge furniture and case goods into the commercial furniture industry, banks, law firms, other sort of conservatively styled type places. And it really at the beginning was taking dining chairs and living room sofas and repurposing them in commercial environments. Over the years that evolved, and that really sort of came to a head in around 2000, when our president and creative director, Jerry Helling, took the company fully into the 21st century with a contemporary direction. He engaged, for this collection, he engaged leading designers from around the world to create what he called Global Edition. Each was given a brief for a specific product, but was kept blind as to who their fellow designers were. And some of these people are names that we recognize in our industry as household names: Yves Behar, Jeffrey Burnett, Leovore Altair Molina, that's now Leovore Altair and Molina, Patrick Juan, Eric Levy, Cul-de-sac, Shimazumi, Pearson Lloyd, and others. So this collection was Bernhardt's first major foray into working with new materials, particularly metals, plastics, and molded foam, and developing supply chains to support the design intent rather than designing to match our internal capabilities. And that's a big change. Rather than creating products and pushing them out into the market that were products that we knew we could make, we led with design and figured out how to make it after that. So transitioning really from a capabilities-driven company to a design-driven company that could leverage its capabilities and expand those capabilities to meet the requirements of a design. So you can see here in this image, there are a variety of metals, plastics, and molded foam and upholstery, and even a task light. While there's this diversity of product and it became a broad portfolio that spoke to the design direction of each designer, somehow it came together as a harmonious collection that really demonstrated Bernhardt's commitment to craftsmanship and design. This repositioning of the Bernhardt Design brand really culminated as well with the launch of the NGO Chair about a year later by the iconic Welsh industrial designer Ross Lovegrove. This was the world's first magnesium chair, and it had to be magnesium because as an aluminum chair, which would have been much easier to do, it would have been too heavy. Magnesium has all the same properties as aluminum, but is lighter in weight than aluminum. So nobody had ever done a chair in aluminum. So our design director and Jerry and design team and supply chain team that was really at that point very nascent, had to go out to the automotive industry to figure out how to make this thing, because magnesium is a pretty common product or pretty common material used in automotive and engines, but usually in non-decorative parts that would be in engines, so they don't have to have a fine finish. So the struggle there was, how do you find the people that have the appropriate capabilities to cast this thing, but also who can polish and paint this to a level that allows it to be a beautiful piece of furniture rather than an engine cog. And that was both a triumph for Ross's design, but also for our ability to go out and develop a supply chain to support a design. And it has since become an icon for our company, and perhaps it might be presumptuous, but to say the industry. So since then, we've gone on to expand the portfolio of designers that we work with. And each designer brings in their own perspective. Again, leading with design, helping to expand our horizons, but also us bringing our talents and our background and our history to the table as well. So we've worked with countless talented designers, from industry leaders to young emerging voices who would go on to become leaders, from student designers to fashion designers, and to even the odd actor. Yet through the years, we have continually married this diversity of design voices with our core talents to create products that are uniquely ours.
Coleman, question. Bernhardt Design, as you just explained, works with a great variety of different designers. Of all of those different designers and collections they've come out with, what would you say is really the main collection that exemplifies what Bernhardt Design is all about?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. I wasn't expecting that. The collection that I think most embodies all of this were three products that were designed for Bernhardt's 125th anniversary. Jerry commissioned three designers and longtime friends of our company, Ross Lovegrove, Noe Duchafour Lawrence, and Jeffson Robb, to reimagine iconic furniture archetypes. So the collection embodies everything that I think makes Bernhardt special. You've got innovative contemporary designs that would have been unthinkable before the 21st century. You've got unparalleled wood and upholstery craftsmanship. And you also have a nod to our long and unique history. So I think that that collection really sums things up nicely. So now I'll go through each of these products because you sort of can see them and how brilliant they are together, but they're even more brilliant independently. For the Harper rocking chair, which Noe Duchefort Lawrence designed, he chose to reimagine the front porch rocker. So he's a French designer, and he thought about classic movies, Westerns and stuff, of the front porch rocker sort of swaying in the breeze, and thought that is quintessentially American. And a funny thing also is that each person who retires from Bernhardt receives a more traditionally styled rocker as sort of a send away gift. And I think it's a great gesture. Everyone, whether they've been there a year or 40 years, gets it upon retirement. I just hope that if I'm still here, that I can get this rocker instead of the traditional one. The next chair is called Anne. And this was by Ross Lovegrove. You could probably tell based on having seen the Go Chair earlier. And was actually inspired by sort of the classic courtroom chairs. If you think about sort of Perry Mason, or going back even earlier to 12 Angry Men or something. The classic courtroom chair is a uniquely American design. And so he wanted to reinterpret that through his own design language. And one of the most interesting things I heard from him was, he said over his entire career, and he's worked with all kinds of space age materials. He's worked for, he's designed plastic water bottles. He's worked in the automotive industry. He's worked across industries, and he's worked with all kinds of materials, but he had never before worked with wood. And he said it is the most complicated material to design with that he's ever worked with, because it's a living, breathing, natural material. Like I said, every tree is different. Every tree's growing conditions are different. You never know what you're going to get. And because of that, it was impossible for him to control, like with a plastic or a synthetic. And I think that drove him crazy. The third product is called the Alex Sofa. And Scottish designer and artist Jeffson Robb looked to the Chesterfield sofa when designing Alex. You know, that massive overstuffed, rolled armed and tufted beast of a sofa that is so popular in, or was so popular in England, but also popular over here. And he wanted to celebrate Bernhardt's upholstery process, but not in an overly traditional way. He wanted to nod to the tradition of the tufting, but he did that through a simple tufting band across sort of an intentionally ruched back, so that the folds and curves and wrinkles that seem sort of incidental on the back are actually intentionally ruched. And that's a pretty technical fashion and upholstery technique that's not terribly easy to achieve well, but I think we have. And since I don't make any of the furniture, I think I can say that. Now I'd like to walk through also some few more products that aren't as literally, don't as literally embody this sort of philosophy of craftsmanship and wood and upholstery with contemporary design, but that still are more than meets the eye. This is another product by Noe. This is called the Chantal Guest Chair. And as you probably gathered by now, Noe is probably our closest collaborator to date. We've done many, many great projects that I think have really forwarded Bernhardt Design, helped forward his career, been commercially successful, and also critically well received. So sort of the perfect trifecta or quadrifecta or whatever it would be if they're four things. So as you can see here, none of the traditional materials you'd expect when you hear the term craftsmanship are evident, nor much what you might expect from a company that celebrates fine woodworking and upholstery. However, as with many of the best designs, the simplest forms are often the most difficult to execute. First, the upholstery is a sock construction, meaning that it's sewn as one complete piece and then socked over the frame. There are no areas that are hidden from view to tack things or fold things or hide anything. This thing is completely naked from an upholstery standpoint, except for a small little plate on the very bottom. So everything had to be sewn together and has to be perfect because there's no room for error for the upholsterer when they're upholstering it. You don't think that when you look at it, it just looks like a simple plain chair, but this is almost more complicated than the ruching and tufting of a Chesterfield sofa. If any one stitch is out of place, or if any fabric is crunched, or if there's a wrinkle in the cover, then there's nowhere for it to hide. Similarly, there's no room for variation in the foam underneath. So we employed a good long-term partner of ours in Europe that is one of the top molded foam producers in the world to develop this in foam. So that every single one is identical and consistent, and we're able to achieve that perfectly crisp shape and upholstery every time. To control quality on a commercial scale for something like this, we employ dozens of quality inspectors who verify each step of the process. Each of these chairs passes through at least 10 inspections as it travels through our factory. Now we move on to the Bom Bom Chair, designed by Italian designer Francisco Favaretto. The goal of this chair was to exude comfort while still having a tailored and contemporary appearance. You can see that ruching detail again on the back with the intentionally sort of wrinkled back fabric, which emphasizes the voluptuous interior, and a seat that gives the impression, even though it's permanently affixed, that it's an overstuffed loose cushion. While the outer frame is contains the upholstery that is crisp and clean, almost like a shell that the cushions fit into. Another product, and this is really a collection by fellow Italian, Luca Nichette. This is a lounge, sectional, and table collection. Demonstrates craftsmanship in upholstery, but also in wood and metal. Similar to Bom Bom, Luca wanted the lounge pieces to be inviting and comfortable, but to almost float above the floor. So to achieve that, we developed a thin but strong die-cast aluminum leg that is elegant and simple, and also not overly obtrusive. Similarly, on the wood top tables, elegantly tapered legs were die-cast to achieve an organic form. And the level of consistency and repeatability with die casting is much higher than with other forms of casting like lost wax or sand casting. In those, which are much more common in the furniture industry, there's variation, and you don't get the exact same thing every time like you do with die casting. Die casting is a much more industrial process. And if you were to go into the factories that do these, they're just these massive molds that are just pouring hot molten aluminum into them and cranking these things out by the dozens over time. But then they also have to go through a whole process of polishing and sanding and cleaning up, because again, going back to the difference between the automotive industry and ours, these have to be decorative. Most industrial uses for die casting are not decorative, but these have to be beautiful, elegant parts that either are powder coated in a clean matte powder coat or are polished to a Mira finish level. And that's not easy to do. The wood top tables, you might notice, they look almost like they're solid carved wood, but they're actually veneer. And it's a very special form of vacuum formed veneer. Not a whole lot of people do this, but we have a partner in the Midwest here who specializes in this. And they basically vacuum form when they're pressing the veneer to give that sort of effect of a solid wood table, while still having the increased strength and durability of veneer and core construction. And it also allows for consistency on a more commercial level rather than somebody hand carving every single one of these things. Now I want to go back to wood again. Typically when we think of wood construction, or at least when I do or did before, or wood craftsmanship, as I do or did before I got in neck deep at Bernhardt, we think of the carved wood of like a Corvo or an Anne or a Harper chair, or even further back to Windsor chairs and sort of classic Chippendale chairs. You think about carving. The Pedersen chair, this wood and metal lounge chair, really demonstrates contemporary wood craftsmanship. It is made with a specialized 3D veneer that was developed in the early 21st century by a German company called Reinholz that was then purchased by Danzer, and really expands the possibilities for formed plywood and veneer shells. Back in the days of Charles and Ray Eames and Arne Jacobsen, they could only do so much with bent wood because of the natural properties of wood veneer. This technology allowed us to create compound curves with wood veneer. You can sort of see them in the seat that they're curving at different angles simultaneously or on different planes simultaneously. And without 3D veneer developed in the past 20 years, that would be impossible. So this is, I think, a great example of 21st century wood craftsmanship, and not what you would typically think of when you hear wood craftsmanship. Now I want to talk a little bit about how we make all this happen on a commercial scale, on a mass scale. And I want to start with this picture of Leanne. And Leanne hates having her picture taken, so it's really great that she's obscured behind the seat of this chair. And as I mentioned earlier, in order for Bernhardt Design to develop, source, and manufacture innovative and high quality furniture on a commercial scale, we strive to have the best woodworkers, cutters, and sewers in the industry. But we also have to have a whole army of people to inspect and repair these. And so, like I mentioned before, chairs can go through 10 or a dozen inspections, from purchase parts through fabric to upholstery and final inspection before it makes it out our door. So these are sort of like the policemen in our factories to make sure that all of our talented upholsterers and woodworkers are on their A game. And when they're not, because they sometimes aren't, we have a whole team of repair people who can touch up everything. This is Roger. He's been with us for about 30 years, and he's probably the most talented finisher in our company. And all he does is repair and fix stuff coming off the line to make sure it's perfect going out the door. So in conclusion, I want to finish with another product that I think embodies the Bernhardt Design philosophy. This is the Mellow Sofa by young French designer Océane Delanne. And it's made of hand-sculpted memory foam and upholstered in an innovative, flexible honeycomb textile. And it rests on a hand-carved base. The dimples that you see in the seat house hand-carved wooden buttons that can be relaxed or tightened by ropes and clips that you can sort of see underneath the base. I probably should have put a detail image. And what you can do is you can adjust the firmness of the foam. So if you let them all the way out, then it becomes this amorphous organic blob that you just sort of melt right into, like a daybed. If you pull them taut, it becomes what you see here, a sophisticated and tailored contemporary sofa. And so in conclusion, a product like this and some of the other ones that I've shown, I think are unique to Bernhardt and unique to now, because they wouldn't have been possible without the technologies we have today, but they also wouldn't have been possible at any company other than Bernhardt Design that's deeply rooted in traditional craftsmanship and quality, but also still focused on contemporary design. So that's it.
Thanks, Coleman. I feel like I've learned so much about Bernhardt Design. I really appreciate it. We're going to turn over to Q&A in just a moment. So as a reminder, you can find that function either at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on your device. Certainly send in your questions for Coleman. But to kick things off, Coleman, tell me a little bit about yourself. What has your career path been?
Since business school, I've forgotten how to do an elevator pitch, so we might need another hour. Well, my background is probably not typical in the design industry, although more people I've met in the industry, I don't know what's typical. I grew up in Southwest Virginia and was the son of a banker. And did you want me, did you turn off the share screen? Okay. Was the son of a banker. And I always wished I'd been an architect or a designer. I always had a passion for art and design, but was a good banker's son and got an economics degree. I then spent 5 or 6 years trying to figure out how to marry this passion for architecture and creativity with a business degree. And so I had stints in real estate development, thinking that, you know, developing buildings, working with architects to develop buildings would indulge that. Stints in venture capital, working with entrepreneurs to take technologies and try to commercialize them. And also in my spare time, collecting contemporary photography and being very involved with our regional art museum. I decided in 2009 to go back to business school, but focus on really marrying my passion with my background, and went to the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business for my MBA. And through classes that I was able to take in design theory at the architecture school and on entrepreneurship classes and design thinking classes, they had a really great sort of curriculum that allowed me to indulge this interest in design. And as part of that, I met an architect in Charlottesville who worked for Bill McDonough and Associates, who this is cradle to cradle fame. And he and a buddy had designed a lamp and a chair, which were actually shown at ICFF Studio, which is a program that's sponsored by Bernhardt Design at ICFF each year, other than this one. And that I'm actually now a judge, one of the judges for. Anyway, he had shown this lamp and chair at school, and we spent the summer between my first and second year of business school figuring out how to commercialize that and build a company around that. After all of that happened, and for a variety of reasons, it sort of petered out. My architect friend said, if you're interested in this sort of design, you really need to talk to Jerry Helling, the president of Bernhardt Design, because you're trying to get in with companies like Fritz Hansen and Vitra and B&B Italia, and Bernhardt is doing that and more here in the United States. And so struck up a conversation with Jerry, and like he does with many designers that he works with, he I guess noticed something, an interesting spark, and the rest is history. I've been here now for 9 years, sort of doing a variety of things in the company, and loving every minute of it.
Nice. And in your current role, what does your day-to-day look like?
Right now, who knows? As I alluded to earlier, the supply chain is becoming increasingly important to us. It has been for the past 2 decades, but really now, based on what our customers are looking for in terms of products, as well as sort of what's changing globally, our supply chain is one of the most critical parts of our company, both as one of our greatest assets, but also as a place, particularly with tariffs and with coronavirus and with oil prices, can be some of the one of the biggest risks to our company. So a lot of my time right now is focused on that. A lot of my time this week has been focused on getting ready for this, so I didn't completely fall on my face. But it depends. I could be in our test labs looking at a prototype one hour, seeing why it failed testing as we're going through development on it, to the next hour being on the phone beating somebody up about price, to the next hour sorting through ICFF studio submissions and trying to figure out how to get that together. So it's really varied. Oh, and maybe talking to our rep about what the oil price is doing to the projects that we have on the horizon in Saudi Arabia or Kuwait. So it feels schizophrenic sometimes.
It sounds like a real mix of a lot of different elements, but I'm sure that's what keeps it fun and exciting. You mentioned in the presentation that wood is a fairly difficult material to work with, and showed us a little bit of the craftsmen and quality control people behind the scenes. What goes into being a craftsman at Bernhardt Design? How long do you have to train for? For some of our best people, it's a lifetime. We've got people in their 70s still working here, people that we've called out of retirement, because for so long the labor market has been so tight in the area because we've had such a great economy, but B, also times have changed, and people coming out of school want to go be programmers and go work at tech startups, and that's very different and requires you to go to a very different place than we are. So it's become increasingly hard to find really good skilled craftsmen, but it takes years, because it's not just about being able to run a machine and do it identically every day. As you saw in that video, a lot of it is finessing, a lot of it is judgment, a lot of it is, even if you're just running something through a turning machine and running 100 turnings at a time, you still have to know what you're looking at, understand the wood to be able to react to the wood, and then what you have to do really to finesse that, because a machine is only going to get you 80% of the way there. Then there's so much more that has to go into a product to make it smooth and polished and finished. Yeah, I'm sure there must almost be a sort of sixth sense that gets developed along the way.
I mean, it seems like a cliche that you talk about these people being artisans, but they may not be taking a single product from start to finish. They may only be working on a few steps in the production line, but for those few steps, they know what they're doing, and it's as much art as it is science.
Right. We have a question from one of the students, Jonathan. What does the designer fabricator process look like when the designer holds little practical experience with the materials or its construction?
That's part of what we're here for. We work with all kinds of designers that don't have the expertise, and to be honest, we have that expertise. If we were looking for a designer to design something that only had the expertise we had, we'd just do it ourselves. So don't be discouraged or intimidated by not understanding the product. Just be humble and willing to learn and open to learning about it, because we're here to learn from you as much as you might be here to learn from us. And hopefully that results in something that is beautiful and sellable. That being said, people that have an ignorance toward the material they're working in and a complete unwillingness to adapt as they learn more are very difficult to work with.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is a collaborative process between the designer and manufacturer when bringing a product to market.
Mm-hmm. And design with a company like us is a very iterative approach. A lot of times when I'm talking to design schools, everything in school is focused on getting to that final portfolio, getting to the final show, getting that prototype completed. For us in manufacturing, the prototype's almost the starting point. there is so much more that goes into developing the product and iterating it and improving upon it and finessing it. You know, I mentioned being down in our BIFMA lab, test lab. We could have what we think is the greatest thing in the world, and if we drop 250 pounds in the seat and it splits all apart and shatters, then it doesn't matter. We're not going to be able to launch that product to the market. We've got to go back and redesign it. And so there's so much that goes into it that we need each other for after that prototype or that first sketch or that first model is done.
Absolutely. Kelly asks, how did the company decide to move from wood-based products, as followed the tradition of the company with loggers, into metalwork and some other different materials?
Well, you kind of caught me. In the interest of narrative, I simplified things a bit. We've been doing things with metals and other materials for a long, long time, but in terms of really being significant parts of a product or designing specifically for that material, that's what probably is relatively new in the past 20 years. But part of being a successful company is being able to gauge your market. And for a long time, traditionally, offices were still traditional, so they still had traditional furniture in it. A lot of people were working in smaller cities, working in older buildings where that all made sense. Really around in the 90s and around the turn of the millennium is when really people on a large scale were working in more contemporary environments and were accustomed to seeing more contemporary products. And part of that was, part of our transition was needing to react to the marketplace and needing to really gain a leadership position in the marketplace. And so I would say that's the biggest thing that's driving it. To be a successful company in our industry, or really an industry, you really have to understand what the customer wants and whether they can vocalize that or not, and deliver that.
Right. Craftsmanship is critical to your product. Is the company planning to utilize artificial intelligence in your production process at all?
That's above my pay grade. We do, when I think of artificial intelligence, I go straight to like ex machina, but I guess in certain ways we do use it. You saw some of our older, more heritage machines. We do have CNC routers. We do have CNC fabric cutters. We do have machines that are doing a limited bit of learning as they go, but not anything yet on the scale that what everybody's talking about in the tech world.
What is Bernhardt Design's approach to sustainability? We have a couple questions about how you dispose of scrap wood and just sustainability in general.
We are part of in the Business and Institutional Furniture Manufacturers Association, which is our industry trade group, has a standard called levels. And it sort of coincides with LEED for architecture and designers, where points can be achieved if they specify level certified furniture in their projects. So as part of that, we I think Anne Bernhardt was a real leader in getting that going. She was there on the ground, sort of on the ground floors, getting the BIFMA environmental certification running, and has really been a champion of it. Part of that, aspects of that have to do with corporate social responsibility in our supply chains, have to do with end of life for our products, have to do with waste. Particularly when you talk about wood waste, an interesting way that we repurpose that is all of our factories are fed by sawdust-fed boilers. So all of our heat in the winters comes from the sawdust that we accumulate throughout the year. So it's not the it's not the most glamorous way of reusing the product, but it serves our purpose, and it is reusing it to continue to refuel the company. We also do offer FSC, which is sustainably sourced woods, and we do Green Guard, which has to do with chemicals and off-gassing and all of that sort of stuff. So we're a relatively small company, so our resources are limited, and we really have to focus on a few initiatives at a time. And when it comes to sustainability, we're really focused on the Levels program, because it's laid out a clear sort of roadmap to help us become better.
Great. We're running out of time for today. We haven't been able to get through everyone's questions, but students, rest assured, we'll be sending out answers following this talk. Coleman, final question for you. Is there any last words of advice for students, either design or business or both related?
Another thing I like to share when I share with students when I get the chance to chat with them or meet with them is this idea of looking at the marketplace. So we're all narcissists at the end of the day, and our first instinct is to design for ourselves. But once you get into the real world, you're really designing for others. And to make a point to not just design what you'd want or what you feel like you need, but to look for a need in the marketplace and design for that need, to try to satisfy that need. Because you could have the perfect solution for yourself, but if only you are going to buy it, then it's not going to be successful. You've really got to find something that is going to be relevant and useful to a group of people. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a huge group, but to a group of people or to a market niche, and design to that.
Yeah, that's great advice.
God, I sound like Franklin Shepherd.
And no, it's great advice. Absolutely. Well, Coleman, I want to say.
I will say on that, to get off the Franklin Shepherd analogy is don't stop designing, because who we go to pick as a designer, each and every one of them have a unique voice and have a unique perspective, and that perspective is important. How it gets married up with a market need is more what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Well, Coleman, I want to say a huge thank you for taking the time to come on and present about Bernhardt Design. This has been so informative. Thank you. And students, I want to say thank you so much for joining. If you want to learn more about Bernhardt Design, you can visit bernhardtdesign.com or their Instagram channel @Bernhardt Design. If you'd like to learn more about Be Original Americas, you can visit our website, beoriginalamerica's.com, or our Instagram channel @BeOriginalUSA. Thank you, Coleman.
Thank you. Hope it was helpful.
Bye.